And thus the saga of Floppy Quagmire begins. Finally getting to show off how great Soldat is. Sarah was beautiful. Elise was beautiful. A really good episode. Honestly, episode 3 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation second season really did well in kind of portraying a lot of stuff. And yes, as per usual, a lot of stuff cut, but honestly a lot of stuff that's not significant. But we're going to get into that stuff because as per usual, for those who don't know, for some reason last week it upset some people. Yes, it's from perspective of somebody that has read all this stuff for this current segment. And so I'm going to give my perspective on how I felt it pulled it off and give people some extra context that was honestly skipped, which again, wasn't necessarily a bad thing this time around. I thought this episode really did cover all of its bases and yes, gave us some really beautiful stuff. As per usual, yes, I checked the Japanese release of this, of the broadcast. Nothing cut here, really. They had the whole segment when they're inside the bedroom where it's like this big black bar. That was in the Japanese broadcast too, which made sense. And yes, kind of goes against my prediction. My prediction was they were completely going to skip the whole brothel scene, which they didn't, which I'm glad about. But of course, there was one aspect of the brothel scene that they skipped that they could have hit on and not skipped, but they still did. And it makes sense to me because having young children inside of a brothel, no bueno, so it makes sense they skipped it. But yes, let's start diving into this. Having the opening segment with Rudeus celebrating with everybody, and yes, where we get a sense that yes, Sarah is getting closer and closer to Rudeus, and really cute little scene. You're obviously seeing this aspect of Sarah growing close to Rudeus after everything that kind of happened. She's no longer pushing him away and no longer seeing him as evil, so she's finally able to open up to him. And yes, it's kind of cute, the idea that she's talking about this stuff, and then he starts talking about Roxy, and immediately she shuts down the conversation. Let's talk about something else. Doesn't want to talk about the goddess Roxy. To give people a little more insight into this whole scene, we do have several points in which Sarah divulges a lot of stuff to Rudeus. He ends up finding out how Sarah originally joined Counter Arrow. Counter Arrow wasn't a group originally, obviously. As she mentioned, she grew up being a hunter just like her parents were, but at some point when she was 10 years old, this horde of monsters attacked her village. But unfortunately, the nobles did nothing to help them. Their entire village was slaughtered. And it wasn't until a group of adventurers came there to try to save them. And yes, when Sarah had just lost her parents, Suzanne came and brought her in. At the time, Suzanne was with Timothy. And later on, they met Mimir and Patrice. And that's when they formed Counter Arrow. It was a name they created to kind of symbolize those that survived this fight in the Millbots region. But again, this is why Sarah hated Rudy so much. It wasn't just the fact that she's seen him as just another noble, but it was also the fact that he was a Grey Rat. And yes, the Notos Grey Rat family headed that region. And they made excuses of why they couldn't send knights there. And this is a really cool perspective, and again, it makes sense that it was cut, but it's also something that gives you a little more broader sense of how Rudeus thinks. Countless times throughout the novel, you'll see that Rudeus kind of thinks in the middle. He doesn't like to assume one side's evil or the other. And this is a case of that because he's assuming they probably had their reasons. He knew Philip. He knew Saros. He knew Saros loved his people. So he knew there was probably a reason why nobody was sent. There was probably some political reason. He understands that there's a lot of people in Osran nobility that are just watching their people die and they're just more thinking about themselves. But he thought there might be some reason why this happened. But he does also acknowledge that the Notos Grey Rat family is the same family that his father ran away from. So he still assumes there might be something there. But again, this gives you context as to why Sarah didn't like him so much. One, he was a noble kid, probably ran away from his family. And again, every noble that she's come across, they just flee the first sign of, danger. But additionally, because he was a Grey Rat. And yeah, at some point, Rudeus says, look, I'm not part of that nobility. I'm not that group. But in the end, she does kind of recognize that she's talking bad about people that are technically within his family. And she does apologize for that. Again, another sign that she's grown closer to him. And additionally, she is acknowledging that they're not all the same. She assumed they were all the same. But yes, that's when we get the shopping scene, which, yes, unfortunately was the intro segment, but again, makes sense. I do have to admit, Sarah's outfit in the novel was much more cuter, but I still like this casual outfit for her. She still looks gorgeous. But yes, because it was an intro, they skipped a lot of dialogue. A lot of it's kind of getting into how the shops themselves are run, how things are kind of priced. He notes specifically that they don't carry lances or spears because of the Superds. Selling lances and spears in a shop is sort of taboo in a sense because of the tragedies that the Superds had caused. But yeah, Sarah looks at a couple weapons. Rudeus looks for a weapon because he wants to replace the one that he got way, way back in the Demon Continent. Sarah comes across two different weapons. One that was good for combat and one that was good for carving because she needs something to carve her stuff. So he kind of suggests just to buy both of them, which he then offers to pay. And then after not being okay with it, she eventually agrees. But yes, that's when we get into the true date between Rudeus and Sarah, which again, I think they pulled off really well. Sarah looks super cute. Mentions all the things they need to mention here. The idea that she feels so much more comfortable with him, and that's why she drinks a lot. And yes, her putting on the obvious signs that she wants to go home with him. But again, this entire date, the emphasis really here is that he's afraid of messing up again. Act natural. Act natural. Natural Rudeus. Don't get too ahead of yourself. You're going to mess things up just like with Edis. That's his fear. He doesn't want Sarah to do the same thing that Edis did. So he's trying his hardest to not assume Sarah actually likes him. He doesn't want to get in his head that he's got a chance with Sarah. But at the same time, as they're progressing, don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. But he also acknowledges one thing. As Sarah's pushing up against him, he doesn't feel the same spark that he had when he was with Edis. Something was missing. And we'll find out what that is as they get into the bedroom together. It was kind of funny. They did show the flask that Rudeus came in to the room with. That was something that was given to him by the innkeeper. As Rudeus is coming in with Sarah, the innkeeper gives him a look like, good luck, dude, here you go. Like, literally gives him an expensive looking drink. The inn guy has grown to like Rudeus. Everybody in this area has. That's why we get that sense that everybody is, calling him Quagmire Rudeus. They're getting the name out there. He's become very popular. And yes, so we have the scene with Rudeus and Sarah. I did not think they were going to show this much stuff. Again, Sarah looked gorgeous. Oh my gosh, she was just absolutely beautiful, which works really well to the context of the scene. Rudeus realizing something's not right. Something's not happening. And yes, it eventually comes to the point where he's like, wait, this ain't working. This thing's not working. And he kind of mentions that in his mind that she's gorgeous. There's nothing wrong with her. It's not as if she, in the novel, it specifically says, not as if she has a stick between her legs or anything. That wasn't it. Something is not working. And he finally realized this was something that he was hitting on back when he first saved Sarah from the Treant. That's what it was indicating there. After looking at Sarah for so long, he thought something was missing. It was his manhood. And he points it out in this scene. Every time I don't want you to be acting up, you act up. His salute. It's constantly something he's fighting against. And now, it's not doing anything. Something was off. And it was that. Yes, Rudeus had ED. And this is something for, yes, an absolute pervert that's crushing. Like, this is something that he's always relied on. He literally has this thing have a name. But what they didn't really get into is that, yes, Sarah tried a lot of things with Rudeus. They tried a lot of things, and nothing worked. It wasn't until eventually Sarah gave up and walked out the door. It's as he's sitting there caught in his own mind, like, why is this happening, that she just dresses and leaves. And yes, says that it was a disaster. And those words echo in his mind. Disaster. I'm a disaster. Not realizing that later on, from Sarah's perspective, no, she thought he didn't like her body. And that's unfortunately something that I really do foresee them not getting into. She thought Rudeus hated her body. And that didn't help later on when he's talking about Elinalise, that she has this childish body that she continues to think, he hated my body. That's what the disaster was. It wasn't that Rudeus was a disaster, which he thinks she meant. No, I'm the disaster. She liked Rudeus. And apparently, he didn't like her. So many stories in the Mushoku Tensei series is about just assuming the other person hates you, when in fact, it's them hating themselves. But again, very beautiful scene. And yes, this was censored on both the broadcast on Japan and this, which I'm assuming is literally Sarah getting up and dressing herself. They just completely blackbarred it. I think they're going to be pushing the Blu-rays more this time around than before. But yes, that's when we get, oh my gosh, it was such a good scene. My gosh, the voicing in this next scene was incredible, but Rudeus pretty much going to drink himself to death. And they didn't really get too much into it here, but yes, in Rudeus' mind in this moment, he's wanting to end his own life. He's drinking and drinking, and the bartender's saying, dude, you gotta stop. And he's like, who cares? Who cares if I get poisoning? This is it, I'm done. And as he's yelling at the bartender, he's feeling nostalgic for his previous life. Yeah, I remember back in my previous life, I used to just yell and lash out at my family until they gave me what I want. And I'm doing the same to the bartender. History repeats itself. I become my old self. It's very brief, but it's very impactful. But yes, that's when we get best boy Soldat showing up. This is the point where all the anime onlys find out how great Soldat is. Despite him coming up and throwing all those insults at Rudeus, man, that lashing out that Rudeus does and finally tells him everything of why he is who he is. And yes, that's why we finally find out from Soldat's side why he hates Rudeus so much is because he doesn't understand that. But now that Rudeus lashes out and explains everything, suddenly it clicks for Soldat. Oh, so that's how you are. That's why you are how you are. Despite the fact that he hates and thinks that Rudeus is creepy with that smile, now at least I understand why you are the way you are. I can't hate you anymore, as he says at the very end. So this is where we finally get the leader of Step Leader, which I don't know that the anime ever mentioned is. It's so funny. I realized, I think last episode, I don't think they ever mentioned his party. Yes, it's Step Leader, and Step Leader is an S-rank group, which I think they mentioned that he's S-rank. That's why they do mostly just Labyrinth stuff. They only helped with that whole situation back at the ruins because they need help. Because essentially frost drakes were coming out of a cave that they're not normally supposed to be coming out of. But yes, throughout the rest of this episode, we get a sense of how cool Soldat is. And to give a little emphasis here, at the end of the episode, we find out that Soldat is leaving town. His party's leaving town because this new labyrinth opened up and they're going to go check it out. So it's kind of pointing out here that Soldat was supposed to leave that morning. The morning that Rudeus kind of collapses and nearly takes his own life, that morning he was supposed to leave with his party. But he stayed up all night with Rudeus. He stayed at his side. What's wrong? Tell me everything. Oh, this Edis girl? Man, she's terrible. I can't believe she'd do that to you. Yeah, I can kind of see it from my own experience. Yeah, you probably screwed up beforehand or something like that. Giving that sense to Rudeus that he really did kind of screw up. But then trying to find him a solution. He stayed up all night, took him to the brothel, stayed in the bar nearby, didn't leave. He stayed there the whole time to make sure Rudeus found his cure. And if he didn't, let's find another one. Let's figure something else out. That's how cool Soldat is. That's the thing that the realization point of him is so good. But no, the fight itself was great. My gosh, the voicing. What caught me so much with Rudeus' outrage was not just the punches being thrown. It wasn't just Soldat sitting there taking it. And it wasn't just the words themselves. It was the emotion. Like you can hear the Seiyu gasping in. He's yelling, gasp in. Yelling, gasp in. Man, she nailed it. The Seiyu nailed that whole scene. It was so good. So much emotion. It was kind of similar to Soldat and his outrage in the last episode. Just really great voice acting. But yes, that's when we get into the whole situation that I thought they would completely skip, which is them going to the brothel. If you want to cure this, you need to cover it up with just the same thing, but just kind of just pour it on. And that is to go see a professional. He takes him to like the cream of the crop of the brothels in this area. And you see it as they're walking down the street in the anime. Like all these other ones, you have these little small places, people standing on the streets. That's not where they're going. Soldat didn't want to give him just anybody. More the ones that are for like nobles and merchants, people that have money. And yes, high-ranking adventurers like Soldat. But what's sort of skipped here is to get a little more insight into Step Leader, as obvious Rudeus is wondering, why would you go to a brothel? Don't you have females in your group? And he said specifically, Step Leader does not allow that. More specifically, their clan itself does not allow a relationship within a party. And yes, Rudeus kind of figures this. Yeah, you don't want to have this drama between party members when you're out there risking your life, especially an S-rank group that goes down into labyrinths. You need to be on point. No drama, no issues within the party itself. So he mentions the idea that yes, he's always looking out for new people. Kind of getting a sense that he might have been scouting Rudeus right here. He's always looking for other people, constantly bringing people in because yes, the moment they have a sign that somebody's in love, kick them out. They're out. Just that's it. There's no, well, I'll keep my emotions, no, out. Kind of an interesting little perspective there. But yes, they go in the brothel itself. Pretty much looks like I was sort of imagining it. And yes, I noticed the moment that he walks in and they have that brief shot of all the women. And I seen that one and I was like, that's going to be Elise. That's totally going to be Elise. This was probably easily the funniest thing in Volume 7. But yes, they pretty much come in there. They get this little sense that there's like all these different things the women can do. And what you want them to do is based on the cost. But then the guy has him choose somebody in the group. And yes, Rudeus goes through each one of them and immediately jumps to one of them, which is Edis. Edis being just sort of 20, this red hair that goes into curls, and additionally, somebody that resembled Edis. So it was like this big funny part of like, she looks like Edis, same hair kind of going on, just a little bit older, and then yes, the name is literally almost like Edis. Edis. It was so funny when I read that. One of the cool things in the brothel is he mentions the idea that all the women were wearing these gorgeous outfits. It's not something you normally see around here. They go on to explain this new successful company called the Remat Chain. And because these are dresses from Asura, which are very expensive, to avoid the taxes, they take the fabric, take pieces of it, and they ship that, they transport that, and then they put it back together up here. And this is something that they've been doing for a while now, and it's made them very successful. And it's all led by Silent, the leader of the Remat Chain, which again is something that they'll get into later on. But this is where we cut a lot of stuff, and again, like I said before, I completely understood, and even if they didn't cut it, I knew it wouldn't be in the global version. But yeah, this is when we find out that a lot of the orphans in the area aren't just street rats. A lot of them live within the brothels. They're taken care of by the women of the brothels. And so yes, when Rudeus first comes in there, he has to be cleaned down. So these girls come in and they bring him to the back and they wash him down completely. And he kind of wondered about them. He thought they were familiar. But then later on he realizes, oh yeah, those were the kids that I see in the alleyways. I just assumed they were just orphans, just street rats. That's what Elinalise talks about when she starts to talk him up about how, oh, you're Rudeus Grey Rat. I've heard so much about you. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been doing a lot of venturing. He's like, no, I heard about you from my sister, the one that you healed on the streets. And he does kind of think that she's just giving him lip service. Like, oh yeah, you think I'm great and all this kind of stuff. You're just trying to butter me up. That's why eventually he just kind of goes, can we just get started? Like he just assumes that she's just trying to butter him up. But no, it was important because what sort of is revealed later on is that these kids that are out in the streets are mistreated by the adventurers. And eventually they will come to serve them in the brothels. So she kind of mentioned the idea that, yeah, eventually she's going to grow up. And then if you come back here, she's going to give you the best service ever. Again, it makes sense why this was cut, but it does kind of breathe a little more life into this whole area. That this is just a thing that is common here. This is the cruel reality of this world. Adventurers mistreating orphans, charging terrible rates to these children. I didn't mention it in the last video, but yes, technically the whole sense of why that's a terrible thing of charging these orphans for healing, that's why she was so afraid, is because they'll take them and sell them off because they have this debt. So they'll sell them off to a trader. But yes, like I said, Elinalise looked gorgeous. She looked so gorgeous. Her voicing was perfect. Just melts the ears. But yes, unfortunately, this doesn't work. Did not work out for him. And the only real context that we lose here is that they, once again, like with Sarah, they tried a whole lot of things. Elinalise sat there with him trying a ton of things. They went through the entire menu that I mentioned earlier of different things that cost money, and even things that weren't on the list that he kind of suggested to her. Nothing worked. And she even had to talk the owner into not charging him for all that stuff because she just wanted to help him. Elinalise wanted so badly to help Rudeus. She felt so bad that she wasn't able to help him. But yeah, with the failure, we get the whole scene with Soldat again. Again, just really him trying to find something to help Rudeus. And yes, goes to Elinalise for her advice, which is the idea that she feels like Rudeus is afraid of women, that he needs to find somebody that he's comfortable with. Yes, Rudeus immediately thinks of Roxy, but he doesn't want to do that with Roxy. The reason why, the deeper context here of why he discards Roxy as an option here, even though he does admire her and he would be comfortable with her, the reason why he discards that is because he's afraid of destroying his relationship with Roxy too. At this point, Rudeus, in his ED, is feeling like he's destroying relationships. The whole thing with Edis. I messed up there. That's why she left me. Then go to Sarah. I messed up there. Now she hates me. The whole thing with Elinalise is a little bit different because he knows he can't destroy that relationship. But then when he thinks of Roxy, no, that's the last relationship I want to destroy. If I were to bed with Roxy, I would destroy my relationship with the goddess Roxy. This person that I admire so much. Never. Never. But yeah, that's when we get the whole mess up scene. Rudeus walking with Soldat, him trying to talk him into, the strategy of labyrinths and how you don't try to push things too far. You gotta take your time with Sarah, go make up with Sarah and everything. He figures at the moment that he can't really help the whole situation because Counter Arrow's out on a mission. He was actually supposed to go with them, and he figures they probably left him behind because, oops, it's daytime already. They're gone. But no, as we find out, they were looking for Rudeus. They didn't go on their job. They were looking for him. And yeah, the entire time with here, Elinalise is with them. And eventually they kind of part ways, and that's when he screws up with Sarah itself. Which, yes, really, really breaks my heart. This whole scene broke my heart in the novels, and it broke my heart here too. Just the absolute mess up that he has here, and just completely... Again, Sarah at this point believes that Rudeus wasn't able to perform because of her body. And now he's literally vocalizing it. Yeah, that child, that kid, going out shopping together. Yeah, I don't need her. I need Elinalise. And that's when it screws up everything. My heart absolutely broke for Sarah. And equally, it does for Rudeus as well, even though this is his stupid mistake. Like, he said the stupidest thing possible. Even Suzanne points it out. That was just not right. Even she seeing what he did was wrong. So at this point in the novels, technically, he pulls a knife out of his pocket and goes straight for it. Rudeus feels he destroyed everything. What is the point in living on? If you remember, when he first arrived in this town, he was broken. I don't have anything. He was looking to die. That's why he took the whole job with the Luster Grizzlies. He wanted to die. Yes, he had the reason for coming there was Zenith, but he was really trying to die. So when this whole thing breaks apart, he realizes, Sarah's mad at me. I destroyed that relationship. I had her. She liked me. Now she no longer likes me. And now Suzanne's there looking at me like I'm the worst person in the world. I can never see Counter Arrow again. This kind of goes back to like way back at when Rudeus first re-met Paul. That whole idea of everybody looking at him. He could not stand the idea of going back in that guild and everybody looking at him. Counter Arrow looking at him with disgust. Everything he built up for this entire year. This has been a year here. I know it doesn't feel like it with this many episodes. It's been an entire year here. Everything he built up, all the friendships, the relationships, he destroyed in one night. What's the point in even trying? Yes, he did figure going back to Paul, taking care of Aisha and Norn along with Lilia. But on one hand, he does recognize that he's probably already gone from there now. And yes, it's a long travel. But additionally, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. I'm useless. I can't handle anything. I can't even live on my own. This is his first experience of living on his own right now. He's destroyed everything. I can't do this. That's everything that wraps up in his mind to pick up that dagger and end it. It sucks. It is so terrible. I'm so happy Soldat was there to say, stop. Stop. Look at your options. Soldat tells him, look at your options. What can you do? Okay, everything's not working out. Come with me. Just come with me. Got this new labyrinth over here. And that's, again, where they kind of realize that he stayed up all night with him. Got this new labyrinth here. Just come with me. Now, Rudeus, at this point, is not going to join Soldat's party. He didn't even join Counter Arrow, even though he was pretty much joining them. He's choosing at this point that I will never join the party again. I'll never even look for a relationship again. There's no point. I lived my whole previous life without a relationship. I can live without relationships. He's sort of just signing off parties, signing off relationships, everything. It's super heartbreaking. But yeah, after accepting to go with Soldat, that's when we cut over to Elinalise. She's finally here. Elinalise is finally here. I've missed her so much. God, I love this girl. I am kind of bummed out they kind of had a missed opportunity here, because the story of these two guys was fantastic in the novels. Essentially, they're talking about this area that they're in, where Elinalise is at this current moment, is this region that's sort of dying. And it's mentioned this idea that when typically regions like this start to die, they get desperate, and they'll often find themselves involved in wars. Either somebody wants to crush them and take them over, or the dying region will be desperate and attack other regions. And so they're talking about leaving. And then they start talking about Rudeus. And that's when it catches Elinalise's ears. Oh, tell me more. Can I help you remember, basically? If you tell me more, we'll have fun together. And they, of course, blurt out where he's at. And yes, it's implied here that she beds them. And they love their night with her so much, they're stuck there. They're in awe. And they can't stop thinking about her. All the way to the point of forgetting to even leave the region and end up getting caught up in the war. It's just a funny punchline at the end of that whole segment. Elinalise is that good. She is that good. But yeah, great way to wrap up the whole episode, and I cannot wait to see more of Elinalise. She's just so fantastic. But yeah, wrapping up the volume itself, there is another chapter, but that could be covered later on. The only other thing that I think they're not going to really cover is, yes, that Sarah herself is just furious at Rudeus after this whole situation. She mentioned the idea that she was consoled by Suzanne, and she decided to go find Rudeus, but then finding out that he's at the brothel. She kind of figured that he was in league with Soldat now, that terrible Soldat, that jerk. But after Rudeus leaves the town, she tries to go find him, and then she ends up bumping into Elinalise. And Elinalise believed that Sarah was the cause of this whole situation. She wanted to blame Sarah. But then, despite their policies of confidentiality for their clients, she ends up telling Sarah everything about his impotence and everything. And this crushes Sarah. Like, she completely misunderstood the situation. She wanted to apologize to Rudeus, but he had already left, and she was fearful of going after him because she was afraid that he'd reject her. She assumes because he left was him rejecting her. She still hopes that one day she'll meet him again. But yeah, that's episode 3. Super good. Like I said, I was very, very pleased by how they adapted this segment. It does feel like just the quality was so much better than the previous episode. The pacing of it at points jumped around, but I think overall they really nailed this segment. It was an emotional set of chapters, and while you can probably make an argument for them not really nailing Rudeus pulling the dagger to his throat, how much was going through his mind at the moment, most of this segment was very vocal. So it kind of works well in an anime adaptation. But for those who don't know, yes, that this whole segment was Volume 7, which is light novel original. This wasn't in the original web novel, so there was a lot of thought process for a lot of people that this volume is kind of worthless. That's why a lot of people kind of wanted to get past this segment quickly with the adaptation. Because yes, like I said earlier, if you realize it, when he came to this town, he was broken and wanted to die. And what happens at the end? He's broken and wants to die. It's sort of something where it builds up something, but then it resets. Which makes sense, doesn't discredit all this segment. And yes, technically later on in the novels, they sort of talk about segments in here. So it's not as if this is worthless, it's just some see it as kind of insignificant. But no, I love this segment. I loved Sarah, loved Elise. They pulled off all this stuff. Super good stuff. Cannot wait for more and more Elinalise. Hope it gets to it quickly. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what's thought of the episode. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button, subscribe my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciated by it supports the channel. Means so much to me, and y'all take care.